Out of 31 African countries evaluated, RMB's Where to Invest in Africa report identifies the top 5 investment destinations on the continent as the Seychelles, Mauritius, Egypt, South Africa and Morocco. Samantha Singh-Jami, Africa strategist at RMB, joins us with more insight behind the report and factors driving the attractiveness of these countries. Thank you so much for your time, Samantha. Now, of course, the countries in Africa are not the same, and there are really a lot of complexities there. Let's actually start off with the methodology that RMB used here. What did you take into account in the system and the processes that were used to rank the different countries?
Thank you so much. So we started this report in 2011, and back then, obviously, the availability of data, and even before that, obviously, it was a bit worse, but the availability of data wasn't as good as it is now. So when we're looking at the methodology, we've moved from something that looks at 6 indicators to a method that looks at about 20 indicators, and within that there's a few more indicators. So it's a lot of data, and it's quite data intensive, but we've broken that down into about 4 pillars. So looking at the economic performance, which is one. I think that's always there to determine the health of the economies. We look at market accessibility and innovation, economic stability, and the general investment climate, as well as social and human development.
All right. Well, I mean, just from what you've seen in the investment landscape, what is top of mind when it comes to investors making decisions on where to invest in Africa? And maybe just another layer of that, have there been any shifts in what investors are looking for, considering the backdrop of political tensions globally that we are seeing?
Yeah, I think over the years there's been a shift in dynamics. Obviously, there's been a lot more countries from the East looking at China investing a lot in the continent or on the continent.
Yeah.
Initially, we had seen, the difference between your FDI stocks versus your flows. So traditionally, your stocks are still dominated by the likes of the Netherlands, US, UK. And then in terms of flows and increasing flows, you're starting to see the likes of China and the UAE. There's also the interesting dynamic where we looked at investments coming through in 2023, and probably you can look at that a year or two before, but I mean, there's been this large focus on renewable energy, and so despite having investments as a whole drop in 2023, I think there's a lot more excitement about the renewable energy sector and the investments coming through there.
It was also quite interesting to peruse through the top 5 destinations that you've ranked there. Are there any common threads that they have?
A little bit, I would say. I mean, where some make up for is in terms of just sheer economic size. So obviously you're going to see the likes of South Africa and Egypt in that top 5, as well as Morocco, I would say. Morocco's scores are almost evenly high in most of these ranks, but I think the surprises maybe to some are the likes of Seychelles and Mauritius topping the ranks. And so when I talk about some indicators compensating for others, when we look at social and human development, it's obviously ranked quite highly amongst countries like Seychelles and Mauritius. Also looking at things like economic stability and the investment climate. So I think those stand out.
It's quite interesting to see, size is not everything, so you also need to dig deeper and look at other things that could actually compensate for that. Just talk to me about the some of the things that the lower ranking countries actually need to work on. Is that also just different considering the complexities that you're seeing, or is there a common thread in terms of what is lacking there?
I think when we look at the continent generally, and we keep talking about infrastructure and infrastructure gaps. So there's probably two ways to look at that. Is that on the infrastructure gaps, it could be an opportunity to invest. So you find that the ones that are ranked lower obviously have that gap, but then there's more, more to it. There's the economic stability and the investment climate that we look at as well, and those rank lowly. In terms of market accessibility and innovation, some of the subcategories we look at is on the FX stability and liquidity.
Yes.
So you would see that the countries that are ranked lowly on our way to invest generally have issues on the FX stability and some of the liquidity issues in those economies as well.
Yeah, quite interesting, because I mean, you may invest in the country, but also as an investor, you do want to be able to get your profits out of that country. So it gets quite challenging when you actually can't. Just lastly, Samantha, just looking at obviously the latest development, something that is of critical importance of the continent, the Afcfta. How closely are investors watching the potential of the Afcfta? Is it of any significance considering the stage where it's at right now?
So I think, when we look at trade and inter-Africa trade compared to some of the regions that we follow, obviously inter-Africa trade is only about 15%.
Yeah.
And I think the value that it would bring with more connectedness amongst our economies is obviously great.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of the economic potential that it could bring, of course, we're all hopeful that this transition's a little bit more smoother than it has in the past, and I think this will benefit all the economies where we've started to see the trade shift from the traditional US, UK, Europe to Asia, and hopefully we can get some of that done within the continent.
Yeah. And just lastly, I mean, just looking at, because this also, it really isn't about the private sector, it's about the public sector as well. And here we've got the, optimism from the government of national unity. Are there any pillars there that, our government particularly should be looking into in terms of what you've been able to outline?
So I think for South Africa specifically, obviously things like market accessibility, I think when you look at the ranks closely, it ranks number one, just because the FX is very important, and general accessibility as well. But when we look at pillars like the human and social development, obviously South Africa has high unemployment and we have vast levels of inequality. So I think those are some of the issues obviously we need to address, but this is not an overnight, phenomena. It's going to take some time to address that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. It is really a good point of reference, and hopefully we will have some movements there as we try to boost our ranking. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights today, Samantha. That was Samantha Singh-Jami, Africa strategist at RMB.